It all starts at Owl City, the very last place humans have left to call home. Fire has consumed the entire city, and everywhere you look are the fallen soldiers who fought bravely but didn't make it. One man is the last one left, and even though there is no hope, he keeps fighting. And this man, Colin Hall, is our hero. Even the demon he is fighting is shocked that he still wants to keep going. Even though he knows there's no way to win, he still won't give up. Because of this, he tells Colin that he will be given the mercy of choosing his own way to die. Colin stares in horror, fearing this might be how it all ends. About a year ago, demons suddenly launched an attack on humanity, and, before anyone could react, the royal capital fell. The normal soldiers fought hard, but they couldn't win against monsters who used magic. Before the invasion, only nobles with special blood could use magic. These nobles think they're the heroes destined to save the world, and they believe their bloodline is the only one worthy of that role. But when the invasion began, they were shocked to realize the magic they trusted was nothing but a toy to the demons. The nobles stood frozen, unable to stop their walls from falling apart and their families from being ripped apart. Now that Colin is the only one left, he regrets not finding a special spellbook sooner, wishing things had played out differently. The demon keeps mocking him, asking if he's finally picked a way to die since he's already planning it, but Colin suddenly retorts that the demon talks too much. Colin's sudden change shocks the demon. Deep down, Colin has decided to use the things he never wanted to use from the very beginning. Colin scrambles back to his feet and runs straight at the demon, but the creature simply steps aside to stop his charge. But Colin refuses to quit, pressing his attack until the demon is forced to open a gap. Colin drove his sword into the demon's chest, shoving him back, but since it caused no harm, the demon laughed at Colin for thinking a simple sword could beat him. Suddenly, a deep cut slashes his arm, causing the demon to scream in shock and agony because he never imagined a human could hurt him. Colin confesses that a normal sword cannot cut a demon. Colin charges at the demon with a forbidden blade that steals souls, setting off a fierce battle that is far different from normal sword fighting. The two clash swords just like on a normal training day, but Colin's desperation gives him the edge. He quickly spots a weak spot, rushes to use it, and slices the demon's arm right off. He lunges for the demon's second arm, only for the demon to catch his sword right then. The demon grins at Colin, suggesting that a surprise strike with the forbidden sword could have changed the outcome, but it's a shame he never tried it. Colin watches in horror as the demon crushes his sword with a simple grip and then smashes his head so hard that he flies backward and crashes into the wall. Colin groaned in pain and disappointment, realizing even his best trick couldn't defeat the demon. The demon steps closer, mocking him for not knowing where he learned such a skill, then declares it's his final moment. The demon snatches Colin up into the air as if he weighs nothing, leaving Colin shattered with regret that all he could ever take from the demon was his right arm, so he can only apologize to the ones who trusted him to win. The demon slashes his throat, and his blood pours down like a rushing river. It was a shock, but when his blood touched the strange grimoire, it woke up. Colin is stunned to find he's still alive when he opens his eyes, which is a very strange thing. But he's in a strange spot, and when he suddenly hears his name, he jumps frantically. He shouts out to ask who is behind him, only to find the grimoire floating in the air. The grimoire whispers to Colin that his blood woke it up, and, sensing how desperate he is, promises to help him go back in time to start over. Colin jumps at the chance to fix his bad luck and agrees instantly. Even though Colin has no idea what the grimoire plans, he doesn't really care. Now that Colin is aboard, the grimoire promises to stay right by his side from now on, so it can help him learn to master his magic. As the grimoire flies open and blinds Colin with a sudden flash, it pushes him forward into a new future. As Colin opens his eyes to a strange arena filled with a masked gladiator named the Butcher, whose giant mallet and wild showmanship keep the crowd screaming, he quickly realizes he has landed in a slave ring. He grips his sword and shield, but as he takes it all in, he finally figures out where he is. The Butcher swings his mallet, but he blocks the blow and the whole crowd, even the nobles, go wild. One noble leans over to Vic, Count Slaith, and whispers that the fight is truly amazing. Slaith sneers that ordinary people are meant to be slaves simply because their job is to entertain the rich. Just then, the Butcher swung his mallet high, ready to crush Colin and leave nothing but dust behind. The Butcher's weapon crashed down with a massive impact on the ground, sending the crowd into a frenzy. As the Butcher's name rings out, the crowd is stunned to see Colin still standing, boldly stepping on the Butcher's weapon before realizing he has been thrown back into the past as a slave gladiator. Because he can feel everything, he realizes the grimoire has merged with his body. Since things have reached this point, Colin decides that from now on, it's time to turn his life around. He leaps at the butcher and chops the man's head off with one strong swipe. Colin starts his journey to save humanity from the demons by using the butcher as his first step. Realizing he has no choice but to master the magic in the grimoire, he pushes himself hard, knowing that dreaming of freedom while he is a slave is pointless, so he must change his status to survive. Colin gazes into the distance, watching the powerful Darius Hall, the ruler of the Rhinelands. Colin decides he must slip into the Marquis's family home as one of them, and this time he's determined to move faster than ever before if he wants any hope of pulling it off. Before stepping into the arena, Colin's master warned him that the common folk had bet their life savings on him to defeat the butcher, but he couldn't win because the nobles were betting against him and he couldn't defy them. His master begged him to lose, threatening death if he refused. So Colin realized Slaith was trying to sacrifice him to please a noble, and he decided to turn that trap into a way to join the Hall family. Colin sneered at them and ordered them to find him another fighter to throw at him. Right now, the nobles who listened to Slaith and bet on the butcher are losing it. They remember the huge risk they took on the game, but Slot tells them to relax because what they are seeing is just part of the plan. Darius stares in amazement at Colin's strike that severed the butcher's head, and when he asks his butler for his opinion, the man admits it's truly phenomenal, noting that even the Empire's finest warriors rarely match such a move. Darius whispers to his butler that the finest moment of the whole affair is watching Colin stand up to Slaith. Soon, another opponent steps up to the nobles, who trusted him, and assures them there's no need to worry since they are just feeding Colin's hope to make the whole thing even more thrilling. He warns them that Colin will be torn apart in the next round. But before he finishes speaking, Colin knocks out his second opponent so confidently that he stomps on him to show his power. Slaith stares in shock as the nobles turn on him, shouting that he is already breaking their deal. He's so scared his pants are wet and can't understand why Colin is doing the exact opposite of what he was told. Slaith instantly commands them to bring all the gladiators together, while Darius just loves watching the show. In past lives, Colin recalls how Darius dreamed of a world where magic was shared by all and gave him that dream to protect. Even though they both failed, but now that Colin has new powers, he's sure he can make it come true and will first try to win Darius over if he wants to sneak into his family. He knows that beating his rivals isn't enough, so he must pull off something truly bold. He dared every gladiator to fight him all at once, and the foolish ones took him up on it. They charge at him, unaware that they are marching straight to their doom, while Colin, with brilliant skill, slices them down one by one. As he works, the common folks jump for joy since they're making plenty of cash. One gladiator tries to sneak attack from behind, but Colin stops him dead in his tracks and drives his sword straight through his chest with such power that the blade keeps going right through the other side. The sword whizzed by so fast it nearly sliced Slaith's head off, but luckily got stuck in a wall behind him. As Slaith's life flashes before his eyes, he burns with rage that Colin has humiliated him in every possible way. Colin grins as things go exactly as he planned, while Seth is going crazy, plotting revenge for the way Colin humiliated him. Now that everyone knows the full story, Darius mocks Slaith by saying the chess pieces have swapped roles and the fisherman is the fish, while also warning him that his plans are ruined and the other nobles are furious. The nobles berate Darius, shouting that as the lord of the Rhine territory, he cannot let a slave walk free after defying a noble, and they demand that Colin be put to death with the harshest penalty possible. But Darius's mood shifts instantly when he asks the nobles if it really is normal for them to look down on others. Darius spoke with a heavy tone, and they asked him if he was still chasing his foolish dreams. 1,000 years ago, a god blessed their ancestors with magic, creating a new world order where they became godlike. Yet Darius refuses to embrace this power and instead clings to foolish ideas. Slaith steps up to Darius and asks if he plans to go against their great god. Colin spots this and instantly turns it into his chance to move forward. Suddenly, a man appears in the stands and asks Sla if there is anything wrong with Darius's dream. When the nobles go wild seeing Colin sit with them, they foam at the mouth and scream that a commoner like him is mocking their god, demanding guards arrest him until Colin challenges their god to a fight to prove who is truly in the right. He groans in frustration, but unable to bear the shame, he has no choice but to step into the arena and face Colin. The nobles think Colin is already dead because he dared to fight Slaith. Darius watches closely to see what happens next. While Slaith prepares his spell with a frown, he mocks Colin for ruining his plans and sneers at the gods they serve. To make things even crazier, he challenged him to a duel, which became the final breaking point. And just as Colin was getting ready to strike, a strange voice in his head warned him that the grimoire had been detected. Suddenly, a status window pops up revealing that Slav is just a beginner with low magic skill, a weak affinity for wind magic, no resistance to magic, and still needs to learn how to wield his sword. Slav pours all his power into a rushing wind blade to strike Colin, refusing to let go of the shame he feels. Even Darius looks worried when he sees this, knowing that wind edge is a magic that turns the wind into a deadly blade to slice enemies apart, and the nobles are already gambling on how many pieces his body will end up in. Slaith strikes true, hoping to teach Colin the stark difference between a noble and a slave. However, Slath's mighty attack only tears Colin's shirt away and hurts nothing, leaving Colin disappointed, but knowing that both the spell and his own magic resistance are still just at a beginner's level. Colin was relieved that the magic shield he gained from the grimoire saved him right when he needed it most. Colin quickly breaks the spell because it's nothing compared to the power of the demons. Slaith and the other nobles stood frozen in shock as Colin tore through Slath's magic and sprinted toward him at lightning speed. SLE grabs his sword to block Colin's strike, but the force of the attack is too strong, slamming him straight onto the ground. Colin presses his sword against his throat to prove he has lost everything. Suddenly, the grimoire shouts a warning that magic is about to strike. Before Colin can react, a glowing circle forms beneath his feet and dark skeleton hands snap out to pin him down. Suddenly, knights clad in shining silver armor burst onto the arena to confront Colin for defying a noble and insulting their god. As Colin is held tight in chains by knights who say they do this for their god, the magic inside him grows even stronger. Colin can only glance sideways at the men, realizing with a jolt that they are God's own guards. In this world, the Magic Tower is a powerful group built to keep the strongest bloodlines on top and make sure everyone follows God's rules. Beneath the Magic Tower stand the God Guards, powerful noble warriors from the Supremacy bloodline who are far stronger than any ordinary noble. Colin could snap the magic seal like paper, but he waits patiently to keep from getting noticed by the big bosses. But he had a secret plan, and then suddenly he screamed out, revealing he is Darius's son, Colin Hall, which left everyone in the arena stunned. Everyone is shocked to learn that the Marquis has another son for the very first time. Colin followed this plan because the Divine Guards would never dare to touch a noble. So he sits and waits to see how things will unfold. Slaith grabs his weapon, ready to strike Colin down, believing the other man is just pretending to be noble to stay alive. Suddenly, Darius's voice rang out across the arena, ordering Slaith to stop right now. Darius stepped toward the scene, and Slaith said he was about to finish Colin off. Everyone gasped when Darius suddenly slapped Colin and called him a fool for ruining the family name. The God Guard are so shocked by what they just heard that they can barely believe their own eyes. Darius seized Colin by the throat, claiming he gave him to the Merchant Guild to teach him a lesson, but that plan clearly backfired. Darius scolds Colin for touching Slaith and realizes Darius is just going along with it. Colin starts to think his big bet might actually pay off in the end. Darius then stepped forward to apologize to Slaith for the way his foolish son had acted so rudely. Colin makes things more exciting by telling Darius that Slaith started the whole mess, which causes Darius to scream at him to shut up. Darius looked at the God Guards and said he would take care of his son himself so they could all go home. But she stands her ground, ordering the God Guards to keep Colin trapped. Slaith points his sword at Darius and shouts that he's just putting on a silly act to trick him. Slaith tells Darius he won't let him take Colin from his current spot because he has to kill him right there, no matter what. But Colin instantly turns his own words back on him by asking if the Lord of the Rhine territory is also on his attack list. Colin flips the script by asking Sla if he's really trying to raise the banner of rebellion. Realizing where things are heading, Slaith quickly drops his sword and tells Colin he's misunderstanding, since this was never his intention. The leader of the God Guards frees Colin from his bonds, declaring it all a misunderstanding, and the knight apologizes to Darius before saying they will take their leave, with the leader promising to report everything back to Iseli and contact him about what they discover. Slaith smashes onto the ground in anger, knowing his time has run out. As they walk away from the arena, the God Guard leader orders his assistant to shadow Colin and report everything they see, since he's certain the Mares have never had a son like Colin. As they head to the Mars estate, Darius bursts out laughing in the carriage and praises Colin for his great show. Then Colin gives a heartfelt thank you to the Marquis. It turns out Darius had told his butler, Cornell, to pay the price for his freedom. Just then, Darius asks Colin if he's ever fought on a battlefield because the way he moves makes him look like an experienced soldier. Colin then shares his tale with the Marquis, explaining that he grew up in a lonely village, and after his parents passed away, he was sold to a slave trading company. After that, a noble man bought him, taught him the basics of magic and how to fight, acting like a real father. Colin says this noble gave him a grand dream, but he ended up failing to make it come true. This time, Colin is ready to risk his very life to prove himself. And his shocking words make Darius realize that Slith's attack failed because Colin had finally learned the power of magic. Darius sees that Colin's strong heart means he might be able to bring Darius's dreams to life. Soon, they reach the estate, and Darius motions for Colin to step inside, telling him he is free and no longer a slave. But he warns that this doesn't mean he's found peace, because in this wild world, only the strong survive. Darius tells Colin that he'll help him get out of this mess and make him a noble, but it's now up to him to survive the next big test. Just then, Darius calls Colin Hall and tells him he's counting on him. Colin lets out a long breath as the first part of the mission finally ends. Everyone knows that nobles only marry their equals to keep their magic and family line strong, and the Hall family is crazy about making sure their blood stays pure. But Darius was special because his mother worked as a servant, and he faced awful discrimination. Despite it all, his nonstop hard work and sheer power carried him all the way to the top, making him the ruler of the famous Rhinelands. As they walked through the Great Hall, Darius told Colin that his past didn't matter because in his house, only strength counted. Darius promises Colin that he'll give him whatever he wants, from honor and fame to riches, as long as he has the skill to earn them. Since Darius promised to give him anything, Colin surprises him by asking if he'd willingly hand over his seat as Lord if that's what he wants. The question leaves Darius and Cornell shocked, yet Darius just chuckles like it's no big deal. Darius tells Colin he'll hand over the seat if Colin is brave enough to take it. Colin wasn't really shocked by Darius's reaction because he always knew Darius was a fair person who believes everyone should have an equal chance to succeed. His sharp thinking made him a target for the proud bloodline supremacists, even driving a wedge between him and his own family. Just then, they stepped into the grand hall to see Darius's family waiting to welcome him home, with his eldest son Freed and his wife Katrina Williams ready to greet him. Katrina greets him warmly, saying they've been waiting, but Darius isn't happy because he didn't tell anyone he was returning home. This proves he has no secrets from his wife. Katrina says that news travels fast among the people whenever he visits, and she even learned about Darius's argument with Count Slaith over a slave through a small, chatty spy. Darius isn't shocked because he knows his wife has spies following him. Colin sees Katrina, the mysterious queen who rules from the shadows. In a past life, she made his existence a nightmare by blocking his plans for Darius. But now that she carries her family's title and wealth as the second wife, she is treated like an equal to the first and is even pushing her son Freed to take the throne. Colin fell in her trap before, but he's sure he won't make the same mistake now. Colin then steps up to the woman and her boy, introducing himself as Colin Hall. Freed hears this and nearly crashes right out, immediately shouting at Colin to tell him who the heck he is. Right when he's ready to step forward and face him, his mother holds him back. Katrina then turns to Cornell and asks how a simple slave could know how to use a noble's name. Katrina scolds Cornell for his poor work, but Colin only makes things worse by drawing his weapon and claiming he took his name from Darius, demanding they accept it while his arrogance threatens to cut them down before he becomes their new lord. Darius is thrilled by everything happening, even though it makes the other two even angrier. The servants and butlers are stunned by Colin's boldness, puzzled by his claim to rule the land. Katrina can't stand it anymore, so she snaps at Colin for speaking up recklessly, especially since he's just a lowly slave. The instant she speaks, the servants draw their weapons and circle Colin, but Darius jumps in to stop them, insisting they stay put because Colin was telling the truth. Darius lets slip that he's already thinking about making him the territory's lord, all depending on how well he performs. Freed protests the decision, asking his father what has gotten into him. Once Darius spoke, Katrina knew she had nothing more to add. Yet she tells Darius that while hundreds of servants toil tirelessly in the estate, almost none have ever earned the right to a family name. Katrina warns Darius that with this deal, not everyone will be happy with the outcome. Since that's how things stand, she proposes they put Colin to the test to prove his strength and satisfy everyone. But if he fails, he'll have to leave the house in disgrace, only for Colin to cut in and say that's not enough, prompting Freed to confidently ask if he's scared and why he can't accept the deal. Colin then says there's no point in making him take the test alone, insisting everyone should try it and that the name should go to whoever passes. Collins insists that a real expert should inherit the family name, not a loser who only got lucky by being born there, and Freed takes this to heart because he knows Colin is mocking him. Freed is spitting and foaming because he has never been mocked like this before in his entire life. Freed can't believe he has to fight against servants and slaves just to become the heir. Just as he's about to lose his mind, his mother taps his shoulder to remind him to stay elegant and not get worked up over a monkey. Katrina warns Freed that he holds magic power, so they should just sit up high and watch everything unfold. Fred wants to be mad, but he has no choice but to listen to his mom. In the end, Darius chose to go with Colin's plan, and they decided to hold a selection test for volunteers just 1 month from now. But until then, Colin is forced to work as a low-level servant, just like he did in his past life. As Cornell walks Colin toward the slave quarters, he points out that Colin can plainly see exactly what Darius wants. Colin acts like he doesn't get it when he hears this, while Cornell claims that Darius is hated because he stands up for what's right. Cornell tells Colin's tale, saying he was picked up by a noble before they met at the slave arena. But Cornell, who got his news from the Slave Association, heard that he was taken straight from a lonely village. Cornell pulls out his dagger and says that Colin arrived right when Darius was worried about who would take his place. Cornell grabs Colin and presses his dagger to his throat, claiming the whole thing was far too convenient to be true. Colin admits that Cornell was right after all, since there is real sense in what he said. But the Slave Association is the kind of people who would fix a match without even thinking twice. He says they set up a deal with Slaith to cheat people out of their cash, and then Colin wonders if the association will just let him be now that he disobeyed them. Cornell pauses to think, recalling that the merchant said Colin's strength was only average, yet his fighting moves were way too skilled for that. The Empire has set clear levels for both sword fighting and magic. While most folks get stuck at an intermediate stage, and only a lucky few reach the advanced level, those who go even further are in a league of their own, especially since nobles who obsess over magic often leave their sword skills stuck at a beginner level. However, places like the God Guards demand that you be truly skilled. Cornell wonders if the merchants lied to him just to get rid of Colin. Colin notices Cornell's hesitation and realizes he's figured something out, so he quickly shares the truth to prove he isn't a spy. Colin claims that if he were a spy, he would aim for the Lord's spot, and Cornell asks him what he means. Colin says that spies often slip into their target's closest circle to find and use their weak spots. Basically, that means if he were a spy, he'd be trying to take Cornell's spot, not Darius's. Cornell remains puzzled, but Colin reassures him that becoming the head butler and exploiting the Lord's weaknesses will be as easy as slicing a cake. Now that they've reached this point, Colin offers a deal. He'll use his job as a servant to find the other noble spies, but he needs Cornell to help him do it. Cornell warns him that this makes him an enemy to other nobles, but Colin shrugs it off as a high-risk, high-reward gamble, noting that if Darius dies, his dream of taking the throne would vanish. Cornell smiles, realizing Colin is not only strong, but also sharp. With such a tempting offer on the table, Cornell can't help but wonder if Colin is hiding some other plan. But he chooses to leave his worries behind and leads Colin to show him his living quarters. Turns out, Katrina split the house servants into 3 different ranks. There are fancy servants who take care of Katrina, Darius, and their son. There are middle-class servants allowed to live inside the big house, while the lowest servants stay in separate buildings far away, where they are not even let near the mansion. Since Colin is a low servant, his job is to throw out trash, chop wood, and care for the horses, and he gets paid 3 copper coins each day for this hard work. Cornell then gives him one strict rule. He must always respect his older servants, no matter what happens. When Colin hears this, he turns to see his seniors already laughing because they found a new toy to play with. As Cornell walks away, he tells Colin that Katrina decided these rules. Colin, want to be a good guy, walks up to his seniors to introduce himself and say he can't wait to work with them. Instead of graciously accepting Colin's kindness, they chose to be complete jerks. They begin to mock Colin, teasing him into believing he could become the next lord. One of them steps up to Colin and tells him they heard he started a fight with the lady of the house. The silly fools tell Colin that they're going to teach him how to say hello properly. One of them snatches a bottle and shatters it to use as a weapon. He orders Colin to get down on his knees, repeatedly promising he looks forward to working them while slapping his own face, and insists he'll keep going until they're both satisfied. One guy acts like he's the boss, grabs Colin by the shoulder, points a finger at his face, and demands to know if he even remembers what they asked him to do. Colin finally snaps, lunges forward to wrench the guy's arm behind him, and the sharp twist makes him scream in pure agony. Even his friends watch in shock as Colin kicks him into a wall to knock him out, then approaches to tell his seniors that since they warned him not to hold back when slapping his own face, he will follow that rule by beating the guy left and right while saying he looks forward to working with him. As the other 2 glare at Colin, they lose their temper and start beating up their own friend. As one attacker dashes toward Colin with a bottle, the other lunges, but Colin slashes his sword and hurls it straight at the man with the bottle. By gripping the scabbard, he throws the sword straight at the guy's face, sending him crashing to the ground right beside the dude with the table, who watches in horror as his friend lands there with a broken face. Before Colin can even react, he deals out his own share of the punishment. Colin jumps forward, kicks him right in the face, and sends him flying far away. The man is barely gathering his strength when Colin's sword drops down by his ear, and his boss looms over him, asking if he is finally satisfied. The guy screams like a pig, telling Colin he is more than happy. Colin accepts his fate and steps back, but the guy isn't ready to get made a fool of by Kid. He snatches the broken bottle and jumps out to hit Colin, only to realize right away that this is the worst thing he could have done. Colin snaps into action in a split second, slashing the guy's hands off and leaving him with a memory he'll never forget. That night, Colin retreats to his room to sharpen his magic skills, knowing that uncertainty lies ahead and he can't afford to rest on his laurels. When Katrina wed Darius, she swapped most of the Hall family staff for her own people and set up strict rules, which made their already clashing views explode into open conflict. Amidst the chaos, they picked Cornell to be the butler who would keep Katrina in line. Basically, Cornell holds the power to drive Katrina's people away and even choose the next heir, meaning no one can take the throne without his blessing. But in Colin's past life, Cornell's death was what suddenly gave Katrina the power to step up as the next leader. Colin knows Cornell's death shaped their fate, but he also knows his weak magic defense means he desperately needs a spell that can both hurt enemies and protect him. Colin reaches into the grimoire and winces in pain as its strange contents rush into his mind. It feels like 1,000 ants are gnawing at him while a surge of energy floods his body, and at the same time his blood, bones, and soul seem to be melting away in a river of hot lava. Voices echo in his head, screaming his name and trying to force him to act. Colin quickly hits his limit and isn't happy about it, knowing that nobles get a free pass just because of their family name. Surprisingly, this challenge just fuels his fire, pushing him to outshine everyone, even the nobles. Colin pushes himself so hard that he finally passes out. The next morning, Colin steps outside the quarters to find his seniors already hard at work. He laughed at them for waking up so early, reminding them that he had suspected they might attack him in the dark, while the servants stayed quiet because they were too scared to face another round of Colin's rough treatment from the day before. Colin smiles, knowing how lucky they are to have not attacked him, which would have been a terrible mistake for them. Colin watches the status window and sees that he has finally unlocked magic, but it's still just a tiny spark while his sword skills are already legendary. Colin grinned with relief, knowing that all his hard work had finally paid off and everything had turned out just right. Colin yawns off his tiredness from training last night and heads to eat, leaving his grumpy seniors helpless before the guard squad arrives and makes the servants bow low before their bald vice captain. Just as the servant was fetching water, the guards appeared out of nowhere, catching him completely off guard. One guard snaps at him, kicking him in the chest and shouting that he has to move out of the road. The water he was carrying sloshed over and soaked the captain's shoe. Knowing he's in deep trouble, the servant bows low and begs the captain for forgiveness, admitting he didn't see where he was going. The captain puts on a kind face, kneeling before the servant and saying he holds no grudge. Just as the guy starts celebrating his escape, Baldy stops him and demands his eyes because they aren't working. Without a second thought or any mercy, he tears out the servant's eyes in a truly gruesome way. The other servants can only stand by and watch as they can't do a thing to help. One of the guards, who was acting way too tough, ordered the servants to drop to their knees and stop staring. While everyone else follows orders, Colin strolls around completely unaware of everything happening around him. Colin was too busy worrying about his dinner, so the man who lost his hands just the day before grabbed Baldy's attention to point out how arrogant Colin was. He insists that Colin severed his hands and warns the captain to be wary of him, for the man is clearly not right. The captain ignores the armless man and calls for Colin instead. Colin turns around with a casual grin and asks if he wants to have his hands cut off too. The dude gives the energy right back, telling Colin that he and his boys aren't as soft as Darius and Katrina. As the guards rush forward with swords drawn, they demand Colin cut off his own arm or they will force him to, but Colin quickly offers them a choice between keeping their arms or their heads, only for the captain to step in and say they aren't here to fight a man like him. Instead, they've sent Dak, the former slave arena champion who knows Colin well, to handle him, even though Dak is just a mid-level reserve guard. He is shocked to find Dak here, since in his past life they were best friends. Colin saw the fresh scars on his own body and realized Dak had just been beaten by the guards. Colin asks Dak if he'll step in for the captain, but Dak points his sword at him, insisting that low-ranking servants must obey their seniors and that anyone breaking this rule must be punished. Colin asks Dak if he's not even allowed to complain, and the question hits Dak so hard that he can barely speak even though he's being treated terribly. Dak stands still in silence while Colin sprints past him to grab a sword. Then in a flash, he points the blade at the captain's neck, ready to strike. The guards stand frozen in shock, screaming as they try to figure out how Colin got to the captain. Dak can't even believe what he's seeing, for Colin just zipped past him in a split second, snatching his sword right out of his hand. The captain keeps acting tough and yells at Colin about who he thinks he is, even though a sword is pressed right against his neck. He reveals that Freed picked him personally, so if he gets hurt, Freed and his servants will become his enemies. Colin glanced around and noticed the servants giving him strange looks, so he wisely decided to step back. The captain thinks his trick worked, but he warns Colin that he won't let him walk away without a scratch. But he still has one last thing to handle before he can turn his rage on Colin. Just as Dax hoped to prove himself, the guards slashed him with their swords and even stabbed his hand, scolding him for wasting a perfect chance to shine. Seeing how they are treating Dak, Colin snaps and slashes their heads off, but the captain grabs the chance to strike him from behind before Colin can recover. But Colin reacts instantly, slashing his sword down. Dak warns him that his sword will be safe, but his head won't be next time. Colin swings to punish Dak, but Dak still rushes in to save the captain. He stops Colin's attack, making Colin wonder why Dak is still helping the guy even after everything that happened. Dak pushes Colin back and warns him to stop breaking the law, gripping his sword tightly through the pain in his injured hand as Colin promises to let him go, but adds that this is the last time. Colin kicks the guards out and asks Dak why he's licking their boots even though he could fight, but Dak just turns to say he's finished now for defying the captain and admits he won't answer why he's acting like a fool since he's going to die anyway. Dak tossed his sword to him with a grin, saying he should keep it since the blade was cursed for him anyway. Later, the captain didn't thank Dak for saving his worthless life. Instead, he pushed Dak's head into a water jar as punishment. Dak says sorry to the guy, but the guy just shoves him hard, so he crashes to the ground like a rag doll. A guard asks the captain if he's letting Colin walk away without punishment, but the captain says he won't do that. The captain orders his second-in-command to warn everyone that Colin has declared war on the elite servants, so they can strip him of his position and leave him completely alone. But Colin still can't get his head around why Dak won't fight back. Soon, the servants gathered to eat, with the top ones getting the finest food while the rest of them were given a good helping too. While the lowly servants line up to eat garbage, the hungry Colin tries to grab his own meal, but the serving boy refuses to give it to him. He reaches out, lifts the plate right in front of Colin, and dumps the food back into the pot. Colin spins around and sees the servants staring at him with looks that seem all wrong. Instead of fighting back, he does something truly shocking. He strolls past the lower servants and strides into the dining hall for the elite, leaving them stunned. Colin strides into the dining room, shoves two servants out of his way, and leaves them stunned while the maids instantly shout for someone to drag him away. Colin walks to the dining table to grab his food while the servants crowd around him, asking what he's doing. Colin brushes them off until Cornell arrives and points out that Colin is standing right where the elite servants eat, yet Colin doesn't care, so the other servants immediately shout for Cornell to punish him. Cornell sees that things will go wrong if he doesn't act fast, so he decides it's all a mistake because Colin just doesn't know his way around yet. Cornell then tells Colin to follow him, and as the other servants watch with disappointment, he leads Colin away without punishing him, just like they hoped. Cornell asks if Colin forgot the rule of obeying his superiors, and after Colin admits he has, Cornell reminds him that Darius promised reward for their skills, meaning Colin has the strength to earn a proper meal. Just then, Cornell let him know he'd said yes to his old offer and promised to help with his everyday tasks from now on. Cornell promises to trade something if Colin can find the spy hiding inside the house. Soon they see the signal for the hunt, and Colin is shocked to see it, so he asks Cornell why Darius is heading to the hunting grounds this early. Cornell says that strange things have been happening in the dark woods nearby, so he plans to check it out while he's hunting. The mere mention of the gloomy forest instantly hooks Colin into the mission. Soon after, Colin wanders into the dark woods to hunt a black deer with glowing red eyes. From his hiding spot in the bushes, he fires 3 arrows at once to take down the deer in a single strike. After felling the deer, Colin steps out of the bushes and uses his knife to cut it open. To his shock, he discovers a glowing monster heart deep inside the deer's chest. Turns out monster cores aren't just made into necklaces. The Grimoire says you can also use them to brew potions and make special items that boost your powers. But what the core can do really changes depending on what kind of monster it comes from and how strong that monster is. Peering closer, he sees the core in his hand is from the lowest tier, but it's perfect for brewing mana potions. Before Colin stepped into the forest, he told Cornell he wanted to hunt there, which made Cornell shocked since only the Guard Corps, elite knights, and special officers were allowed inside after the Dark Forest incident. Colin still finds a way in, claiming he's free to enter as long as he stays with the Guard Corps. Colin is rummaging through the deer's insides when exhausted Dax suddenly appears, having been searching for Colin after he vanished. Dak stares in shock at Colin, standing over a deer, since hunting is a privilege reserved only for nobles and their high-ranking servants. Colin doesn't care about the complaints and takes the sword anyway. Colin drives his sword into the deer and whispers to Dak that they've found a solution. The animal will look like it was killed by Dak. Dak frustratingly yells at Colin that his silly logic won't work. Dak hasn't even spent an hour with Colin, and he's already losing his temper. He thinks Cornell messed up by setting him up with Colin, and he's still puzzled as to why the butler made that choice. Just as Dak was alone, Colin popped up with Cornell's dagger to tell him he'd just been given a mission. So they must ride out to the hunting grounds to help Darius with his search and gather some food along the way. Dak can't believe his rotten luck for being stuck with a troublemaker like Colin. So Dak chooses to keep his mind on the mission for now. Just as Dak started cutting up the deer to pack home and prove himself worthy of joining the group, Colin suddenly began packing meat and grilling it without warning. Dak freezes in shock and asks Colin what he's doing, but Colin just says he's grilling meat, and Dak argues that the food belongs to Darius and his family, so Colin can't just eat it whenever he wants. Colin takes a huge bite and tells Dak they have plenty, so there's no reason to hold back. He shoves the meat toward Dak and insists he take a bite as well. Dak tries to turn down the offer, but Colin points out that he only gets fed once every 3 days. He also warns Dak that he'll be punished no matter what because he let him steal his weapon. Colin suggests he eat his fill, noting that Dak won't be able to protect the family on an empty stomach, and promises to keep it secret. He shoves the meat right up to his nose until Dak can't hold back any longer and has to snatch the huge piece. As he dashes to the corner to snatch the meat like a hungry dog, all while pretending it's for the family's sake, Colin watches Dak starve and finally asks why he follows the guard's orders when he's clearly stronger, only to hear Dak claim that his god devotion makes him noble and that he hopes for a better life next time, revealing he worked so hard to become a mid-level servant just so his sister in the countryside would be proud of him. He screams at Colin, yelling that his idea means throwing away everything he has worked so hard to build. Dak admits he doesn't understand why Darius is a meritocrat, but he thinks they are just lucky to be servants, believing they should work as hard as they can without ever questioning anyone. Colin then slams his fist down on the other man, yelling that the nobles aren't blessed by gods, but are just using magic, not realizing how much they are underestimating it. Dak says he's not bothered by it, so go ahead and cast 1 or 2 spells. Colin then surprises him by asking what he would do if he told him he could use magic. This catches Dak's full attention, and he locks eyes with Colin to ask if he can use magic. Before they can dive into their talk, a distant scream snaps them out of it. It turns out the screams belong to a group of guards battling a pack of firewolves. The team gets overwhelmed by the huge pack of wolves, leaving their leader Glenn shocked that he's fighting real monsters, but he manages to dodge their attacks and strike them down. Just as the wolves crush him and he's about to fall, arrows shoot out from nowhere and strike the beast attacking him. It turns out his rescuers are Colin and Dak. Colin spots the flame wolves, legendary beasts so deadly that killing just one is enough to let a hunter live comfortably for a long time. Most importantly, the wolves hold powerful cores that he desperately needs. Now that he knows what's at stake, Colin is ready to track down every last one of them just to get their cores. Without a second thought, Colin lunges at the wolves, leaving Glenn shocked because he knows those beasts can't hurt him. Colin easily takes care of them by firing a few shots to bring them down. A wolf suddenly jumps out from behind to attack Colin, but Colin twists away just in time, shocked that they keep coming even though they see he is so much bigger than them. Just as the wolf jumps over him, Colin strikes the perfect spot with a kick that sends the beast flying so hard it leaves the guards in stunned silence. Colin didn't stop there. He finished off the wolf with a sharp, well-aimed arrow. The other wolves instantly spotted Colin as the biggest danger and turned on him, only to charge straight into their own deaths, while Glenn watched in shock as Colin played with them while his friends struggled to survive. One wolf charges Colin with fire, but Colin jumps to dodge, shoots his arrows back, and kicks the beast down. Though he relaxes, an arrow whizzes past his head to skewer a wolf attacking him from behind, proving Dak was watching and telling Colin never to let his guard down. Colin winks at the guy and gives him a thumbs up to show how proud he is of the great work they just did. With this, they clear out the wolves and Glenn praises their skill, asking who they serve. Dak replies that though not direct subordinates, they work for Darius, revealing he is a guard reserve. Colin is just a servant, and they are there to back up Cornell's orders. Glenn and his team are stunned to find out their own fates. Glenn's men hated being saved by lowly servants. While they're busy gossiping, Colin is already grabbing the monster cores, and it turns out the wolf's core is of intermediate rank. Colin is sure that if he follows the steps in the magic book, he will get what he wants. Suddenly, Marvin, the large man in Glenn's squad, yells at Colin, demanding to know who gave him the right to touch the monster. Glenn rushes in and tells the other guy to let Colin handle the monster, saying they need to focus on helping Darius right now. Colin won't let things slide since that guy called him a brat, especially when Colin points out the very person who just saved his life. The guy finally loses his temper, but Glenn and Sarah, the woman on the team, hold him back. Colin isn't a stranger to the trio because he already knew them from his past life. It turns out the trio and Cornell were the people Darius trusted most in the world. It turns out they died back when they explored the Dark Forest, and that event is what caused Darius to lose his power. Colin feels lucky he ended up there because he plans to change their fate and keep them safe from danger. Watching Marvin fly off the handle, Dak steps right in to calm things down and remind everyone that Colin is new and still learning the ropes. Sarah throws Dak under the bus, calling him Katrina's dog and telling him to stay out of her way. When Glenn learns Colin is new, he instantly realizes this is the guy who dared to tell Katrina he'd become the Lord. Glenn tells Colin that he's quite strong, but warns him that if he doesn't let go of his ambition, he might regret it later. Glenn says they must go to finish their mission, but he promises Colin that saving them means a lot to him. Suddenly, danger rushes in, and before anyone can react, the King of Flame Wolves and his pack arrive. The team freezes in terror, knowing the Flame Wolf King is a force they simply cannot fight. To make matters worse, the king arrived with more soldiers, and right then a wolf lunged at Glenn. Glenn stops dead with pure terror as he braces himself to be crushed flat by a giant foot. But Colin saves him once more, leaving the speaker to honestly ask who Colin really is. Colin just smiles at him and says, "You saved my life again." Colin swings his blade at the Wolf King, but the beast blocks the blow and shoves him backward, making it clear that his sword alone isn't strong enough to defeat the monster right now. Sarah and Glenn rush to check on Colin as he gets shoved back, knowing full well that the Wolf King is a fearsome enemy who has already defeated many Imperial elites. Before the team even realizes it, the wolves have trapped them, and Marvin yells at his boss in panic, worried that fighting regular wolves is hard enough, but now they're being hunted by the king himself. Just then, Colin tells Marvin not to fear the ordinary flame wolves, because they are nothing but puppets dancing for the king. Colin says the flame wolves just follow their king's orders without their own minds, which means if they kill him, the rest of them will be finished too. Glenn is stunned when he learns that Colin wants to challenge the king, and even Dak agrees, insisting they have no chance against a foe that the Emperor's own elite guards couldn't beat. It wasn't bad enough before, but now he tells Colin that their swords are broken. But Colin tells the team that without trying, they'll never know if they can win. Glenn nods that survival means fighting, but Sarah worries that swarming past a dozen firewolves to reach the king won't be easy at all. Colin rushes in to tell them they don't need to worry, because a great chance is coming right up. Just then, the Wolf King lets out a roar that shakes the air, signaling his hunters to attack the team. Glenn orders his men to fight back, but Colin tells them to stay calm and let the wolves come closer. Marvin shouts at Colin about who gave him the right to command, but Glenn urges him to stop fighting since they can't afford it and must follow Colin's orders for now. Just then, Colin tells Dak to follow him, and though Dak is confused and hesitates, Colin asks if he's ready to be the kind of big brother his sister can be proud of. Colin's words struck a deep chord, causing Dak to suddenly think of his sister, Erica. As the wolves rush closer, Colin orders the team to hold their ground and let the beasts get into the perfect spot. Then he commands Glenn to use his sacred shield skill to blind the charging wolves with a swift sword strike. Glenn follows orders, and the instant the wolves go blind, Colin yells at Marvin to blast them away with a slash that shakes the heavens. Marvin jumps as told, landing with a mighty boom that throws the wolves running in every direction. But Colin has already planned his next move, so he asks Sarah to swing her phantom sword and clear a path. Sarah obeys Colin's commands, slicing through the pack of wolves, and Glenn is completely stunned by how well Colin knows each of their unique strengths. With Sarah clearing the path ahead, Colin steps forward and orders Dak to follow his lead. Sarah playfully calls Dak a puppy and warns him not to let her down. As they sprint toward the Wolf King, Dak wonders what Colin's plan is, and Colin reveals that while the king usually scares his foes, a fearless charge might finally shake him since humans are easily rattled too. Dak is still confused and asks Colin what he means. Colin shakes him off and warns Dak that swords alone won't bring the king down. Dak instantly realizes Colin means they will use magic to fight the Flame Wolf King. Colin didn't hesitate. He fired up his mono lines to get his magic ready. When everything was ready, Colin made ice flowers to fight the Wolf King. Dak stares in shock, unable to believe that Colin actually had magic power since he thought Colin was just making it up. After the first assault, Colin taunts the Wolf King, daring him to try attacking again. The Wolf King holds his ground and stays tough, which only pushes Dak to step right in. He jumps right at the Wolf King and drives his sword straight into his nose. Colin prays Dak and told him to keep the pressure up. While the Wolf King fights Dak, Colin takes his time to craft a devastating blow that strikes the monster like a sharp blade, leaving him reeling in horror. With this, the two team up to beat the wolf, and the rest of the pack runs away instantly. Dak is totally stunned to discover that Colin actually has magic. Glenn and his team arrive, thanking Colin for taking out the monster. Marvin stares in awe at the giant monster they just defeated, while Colin admits that their clever plan saved the day and they might not have made it without his help. Sarah sees the broken ice on the ground and starts to wonder if Colin has magic, but no one else even looks at it. Marvin bursts into laughter, noting that Colin brings back memories of Darius back in his youth. Sarah tells them they used to be part of the Liony Heart Knights, led by Darius, and after that group broke up, the survivors became elite knights. Then she roasts Dak by calling him the old hag's dog, which only leaves him confused about what she means. Dak snaps and yells at Sarah, demanding to know what she means by calling him a dog when his name is clearly Dak. Marvin leans in and whispers a secret into Dak's ear, revealing that Sarah secretly refers to Katrina as an old hag for reasons only she knows. Dak is thrown back to the Stone Age because he can't believe anyone would dare call the lady of the house an old hag. Soon, the two start fighting over whether Sarah is a proper lady or just a young woman in her best years. While the two goof around, Colin remembers how amazing Dak's life was in his past. Suddenly, Freed the Vibe Killer steps right in and demands to know what everyone is doing. Everyone is stunned to see him arrive since no one expected it. And right away Dak and the others drop to their knees while Freed says he came running because he thought something was wrong. Suddenly, he spots the dead flame wolves lying on the ground and asks Glenn what happened. Glenn explains that while they were out in the woods, the pack attacked them until Dak and Colin came to their rescue. This is the moment Freed finally sees Colin standing right there. Colin was too busy gathering monster cores to move when Freed showed up. Just then, Glenn tells Freed that Dak and Colin are amazing, suggesting it would be nice to tell the family head about their great work. The instant Freed hears this, he panics because if his dad finds out about Colin's, he's going to lose his spot in the line of succession. Freed is on the verge of losing his mind when he suddenly sees Dak, and a wild idea instantly flashes through his head. Freed turns to Dak and scolds him for breaking the rules by bringing low-rank servants into the hunting grounds, then adds that Dak's sister will be ashamed to learn about this mess. Colin jumps in to tell Freed that Dak is way better than him, just a spoiled kid who cries to his mommy when he can't do anything. Colin finally looks at Freed and calls him a failure, just like he always does. Sarah nearly falls over laughing at the news, while Freed goes crazy and double-checks if he actually heard Colin correctly. Colin goes on to tell Freed that his men don't kneel because they think he's great, but simply because they have to. He tells him that people only respect him because his mother is Countess Katrina, and even the guards and servants can't believe how bold Colin is. Colin mocks him, saying it must feel good to act so superior just because his parents are famous. Freed told Colin he could kill him right now, and Colin agreed. However, Colin still insults him, mocking him with a cruel tone that finally makes the madman break free. He snaps and commands that Colin be held down. Out of nowhere, masked men burst in, grab Colin with heavy chains, and press a knife right against his throat. Sarah and her team spot the group that just arrived. They are a terrifying group of professional killers and spies hired by Katrina's family, a force so feared that even nobles shake at their name, leaving Sarah shocked that Katrina would trust her son's life to such dark people. Just then, Glenn dropped to his knees and begged Freed to stay calm, explaining that Colin and Dak were actually there to help with the investigation, not to cause trouble. Freed glares at Glenn and shouts, asking if he's joining against him too. And this question leaves Glenn stumbling for words. Watching the situation unfold, Colin warns Glenn to stay out of it. He orders him to go and tell Darius what he finds out. Sarah quickly realizes Colin is actually trying to help him get away. Sarah says they should quietly step back since they can't take either side. Glenn listens to Colin and quietly steps back, giving Freed the full power to lead. Freed sneers at Colin, pointing out that the boy is completely powerless and that Freed holds his very life in his own hands. Colin mocks him, daring him to just kill him already instead of wasting more time. Freed grinned wickedly, declared he had a brilliant idea, and called out to Dak. He hands Dak the weapon and warns that actions have consequences, then commands him to pick up the sword and kill Colin. By doing this, he will wash away the memory of everything that ever happened. Before the demons arrived, a month ago, Colin and Dak were caught by orcs, tortured for a while, and then the Orc King decided to have some fun with them. With Dak held fast, the Orc King orders Colin to put Dak down himself if he wants the other prisoners let go. Colin grabbed the sword, realizing he had to choose between saving hundreds of lives or his best friend. As Colin steps toward Dak with his sword, Dak begins to tell the sad story of how his sister is the only family he has left. Darius took him in, but because Katrina ordered it, Erica had to be sent away to live with the Williams family. Dak clings to the hope that his sister is safe out there and begs Colin to watch over her after he is gone. He says his sister has always been a picky eater, but he tells Colin not to spoil her too much. Dak even begs Colin to tell his sister that he finally became a real knight. After Colin heard his sad story, all he could do was share his deepest sympathy. Now in this new life, the roles have flipped, and Colin finds himself holding the blade that will strike him down. Freed sees Dak freezing up and asks him why he's holding back. Dak admits he's struggling to pull the trigger because without Colin, they would all be dead, and killing the one who saved them feels too hard. Freed hears this and takes the chance to poke at Dak's feelings, warning him that Erica would be crushed to find out her own brother left her behind for a stranger. Dak insists that Freed would never do such a thing. Then Freed adds that he had heard something about Erica a few days earlier. It turns out Erica has been starving herself to save money for her brother's sword, which actually caused her to collapse from exhaustion. Dak is totally shaken by what he hears, and Freed warns that he can't be trusted to take care of Erica if he won't do what he says. Dak crashes to his knees, pleading with Colin to save his sister, while Freed coldly orders him to kill Colin if he wants her to live. Suddenly, Colin bursts into wild laughter, leaving Freed confused and demanding to know what's so funny, while Colin brags that no coward could ever kill him. Colin urges Fred to let him and Dak fight to the death. Colin manages to persuade Freed that it's far better than letting Dak spend his days sulking at home. Freed pauses to think, and when he realizes he has nothing left to lose, he orders the assassins to release Colin so he and Dak can fight on their own. As soon as he's free, Colin lunges forward with his sword pointed at Dak, leaving the guy completely shocked. Dak is totally lost, wondering if Colin really means what he says or if he's just acting. Dak stays frozen until Fred warms him up with a little fire and reminds him not to let his sister down. The words echo in Colin's mind as he charges forward, sword raised. Dak barely dodges the blow, but Colin's speed and strength slam him backward. Colin keeps pressing the attack and leaves Dak stunned, only to reveal that he has no choice but to fight because he has no plans on dying either. When Dak finally snaps into the fight, he blocks Colin's charge and pushes him back, only for Colin to boast he'll end in 3 moves, prompting an angry Dak to shout that he won't need 3 moves, just 3 seconds. After staring each other down for a second, the two finally spring into action. As they spring toward one another, Colin leans in close and whispers a warning to Dak. Don't forget your friends. The two blades lock together, giving Dak just a second to think about Colin's words. It turns out Colin's words touch the heart of Dak, and once they truly understand one another, they walk past each other with forgiveness instead of anger. Right then, the two swing their weapons together, creating a blinding whirlwind that leaves Freed completely lost until Colin drops from above, sword aimed straight at Freed. But Freed stops Colin's attack using his magic. Colin didn't expect Freed to have the courage to stand up and fight. Freed snaps Colin to the ground with a blast of lightning, growling that he should never underestimate him. Freed shouts at the assassins to stay back, so he can kill Colin himself. Freed rages with his magic at its peak, and Dak freezes in shock as he realizes the terrible truth unfolding before him. Right then, the grimoire warns Colin, and he quickly sees that things are getting far more complicated than before. Colin looked at Freed's stats and saw that he has intermediate magic power and can use lightning. His magic skills are only average, and his swordplay is still a beginner's, so the system warns him that he can't take Freed's attack because his magic defense is too weak. Colin is stunned by what he sees, but he won't back down, so he chooses to keep fighting until he knows the truth. Meanwhile, Fred is furious and screams at Colin, boasting that he's about to prove the difference in their power. Freed throws his lightning spell, but Colin quickly builds an ice wall to stop it. This leaves a bang that flings dust into the air. Freed can't believe what he just saw, since he refuses to accept that Colin is using magic. Still refusing to believe it, he spots sharp ice shard around him and feels completely lost. Now that the dust settles, Colin stands tall with only a few scrapes and taunts Freed, daring him to admit if he truly gave it his all. The servants still can't believe Colin made it through Freed's attack. Freed finally realizes Colin must have used magic, but he stubbornly refuses to accept what is right in front of his eyes. He can't bring himself to think a lowly slave like Colin could have a gift for magic, so he readies a powerful spell to strike instead. Colin steps up to stop the attack, only to find out with a heavy heart that his magic book won't work because he has no magic left inside him. Colin drops to his knees, realizing he is lost, and before he can even think, Fred's lightning blast strikes him. Colin screams in agony as lightning sears his nerves, and in his desperate fight to stay alive after a second chance at life, he unleashes every ounce of strength he has left. The grimoire steps in to warn him that trying to cast magic without enough mana might make him snap and go wild. Colin tosses aside the warning, refusing to let fear get the best of him. He pushes himself so hard that a dark aura suddenly wraps around him, turning him into a cyborg. His numbers skyrocket so high that the system can't even calculate his magic, leaving the screen filled with wild, unknown figures while Colin clutches his head in pain, wondering what is happening to him. So he chooses to ignore the warning and simply use his power before it runs out. Colin jumps straight at Freed, who is totally overwhelmed. Fried raises a shield of magic to block Colin's charging attack. Colin slashes through the guard with his sword, nearly chopping off Freed's head, and before Freed can catch his breath, Colin strikes again, this time so hard that Freed dodges, but his horse gets sliced down by Colin's fury. Fred jumps back to avoid Colin's hits, but he quickly sees that Colin is already tired out. Freed realizes he can use this to his own benefit. He builds a lightning shield, but Colin dashes right through it like a rabid dog. Colin rushes to Freed, just as Freed begins to see heaven opening up before him. Right as Colin's sword is about to cut his neck, a golden shield pops into place to block the blow. The shove sends Colin flying backward, and the hero who saves Freed is his own dad. Darius scolds the two, reminding them they are in a hunting ground, not a fighting arena. He says if they really want to fight, they should wait until they get home first. Once Colin sees that Darius has made it and is safe, he finally gives up and passes out. A few days later, Colin opens his eyes, and the very first thought that jumps into his mind is how he has become a cyborg. He leaps off the bed in fear to check himself, only to sigh with relief that he is finally back to normal. Just then, he hears Dax's voice calling out from the room to bring him back to life. Colin lets out a terrified scream because Dax's face is so pale he looks like a ghost. After he finally calms down, Dax tells him that he blacked out right after the fight with Freed. He says that Glenn was the one who carried him back, and Sierra gave him to the doctors while threatening to kill them if Colin died. Colin hops off the bed, feeling brand new, and decides he's ready to thank Sarah and the others for saving his life while grabbing some food. Colin casually gives Dax a thank you for all his help. Dax was shocked to see Colin actually know how to say thank you. As Colin strolls through the mansion, he feels eyes on him like he's just become a ghost. He overheard the maids chatting about him and Freed, so he stepped up to ask what they knew. It was a shock when the girls bolted away as if they'd seen a ghost, and Colin blamed Dax, claiming they just couldn't stand his pale, ugly face. Dax yells at him, asking whose fault it is that he couldn't sleep while keeping watch over his knocked-out friend. As the two friends start their usual friendly rivalry, Baldy and his crew suddenly show up. Baldy crashes right into the middle of their talk, but they all scream at him to get lost and leave them alone. Though shaken, he calms down and tells the two he's there to settle the score from the day before. Colin speaks nonsense, while the Baldy claims he only surprised Colin last time they met. But this time, he's ready for it, and things won't turn out the same way. Colin stares at him, puzzled by what this guy wants, but when Baldy snaps his fingers, nothing happens. He spins around to scold his men, reminding them they were supposed to move the moment he snapped his fingers. But his men still fear what happened last time they crossed Colin, especially after hearing about his fight with Freed, so they aren't going to risk getting their hands broken. The captain sees right through how useless his crew has become, but his pride won't let him back down, so he suddenly grabs Dax by the collar and accuses him of betraying Freed. He tells Dax that he's going to take him to Freed to face punishment. He lunges to punch Dax, but this time Dax catches his arm and tells him he has no right to judge him. He throws the guy to the ground in shock, then Glenn and his men rush in to ask what's wrong, while the Baldy sees it all and decides that Colin and Dax are finished because the elite knights don't give a second chance. The man hypocritically bows to welcome Glenn, who immediately asks what the problem is. The guy shows he was ready to teach Colin and his friend a lesson for being rude. To his shock, Colin treats them like old friends, and Baldy is ready to snap in anger. Marvin steps in and smacks Baldy right in the face to clear the way. The guy stares in shock as Marvin and Sarah grab Colin and treat him like one of their own. Baldy insists he's just dreaming and immediately shouts that the elite servants are breaking the rules by playing around with the lowly ones. Sarah then steps in to tell him that none of the rules Katrina made really matter to them. Sarah tells him to stay quiet or he might lose his other eye too. The guy watches Colin strut away with Glenn's team, laughing and saying, "You just won again." The group heads to a tavern to celebrate, and Colin tries to thank them for saving him, only to realize they've saved him once more. Glenn says he is their savior, while Sarah adds that they have never liked Baldy. Dax asks if they know the guy, which makes Sarah snap at him to drop it, so Dax immediately backs off and apologizes for bringing it up. Just then, Glenn invites Colin and Dak to join them, explaining they're the last 3 elite knights standing. Dak nearly loses his mind hearing that, since he never imagined himself standing so high. Colin reveals he doesn't want to be an elite knight because he has much bigger dreams. The 3 of them instantly grasp his meaning. His dream is to become the head of the household. Marvin tells Colin to drop his dream of becoming a lord and stop getting arrogant just because he defeated Freed with a strange sword trick, warning him that Freed isn't his only challenger. But Sarah interrupts to call him out for thinking it was just sword skills, pointing out that Colin actually used magic to defeat Freed and likely to take down the Flame Wolf King as well. Marvin can't bring himself to believe it, since a former slave like him shouldn't have any magic at all. Glenn makes Colin spill the beans, leaving him sweating because he was already scared they'd catch on. But he had been ready for this all along. Just as he was about to explain himself, Sarah leaped to the conclusion that Colin used to be a noble. Sarah grabs Colin and insists she knew the truth. He is a noble's illegitimate child who was hunted down and enslaved by a secret plot. Sarah says that Colin wants to win back everything he lost by joining Darius's home. Dak can't believe Sarah figured it out, and to his shock, Colin agrees with her, telling her she was right, which makes Sarah happy while Glenn angrily blames the Empire nobles. Collins begins telling a made-up tale about how he was born a noble in Isle, but was driven out by a secret plot, forced into slavery, and now promises to make the nobles pay while shedding crocodile tears as Marvin and Sarah cry with sympathy and Dak watches in amazement. Dak knows Glenn won't be fooled, since Sarah and Marvin already bought Colin's silly tale. Glenn is totally crushed to see that Colin has fooled him, so he quietly promises to keep the secret as long as Colin doesn't cause any trouble. But he tells him he can never use magic when Katrina or Freed are around, and Colin agrees. After this, Glenn tells Colin that Darius wants him at the office once he wakes up, and as Dak and Colin walk away, Glenn quietly mouths the city of E, showing that he doesn't fully believe Colin's story. Dak tells Colin he's shocked that his lie worked, but wants to know why Colin picked Eiley. Colin explains that I is a mix of good and bad, and since Ollie is so far from Ree, their investigation will be tough. Colin claims that the sad noble tale is an easy trick to fool people, so Dak shows him a strange sign and asks if he knows about the 3-legged crow, since he doesn't want to believe it's just another distraction. Looking back, Colin quickly chopped down the orc to save Dak and asked him to share all the sweet things he said with his sister. Colin charged at the orc leader, but the brute raised a wall of water to stop the attack. He tosses Colin into the water shield, sending him under and making him start to drown. While the orc king brags about his strength, Dak pops up from below to remind him that he's still alive. The orc king freezes as Dak suddenly appears, letting Colin's sword break through his guard. Colin and Dak slash the orc king down with ruthless teamwork, and they win the fight. The two then tear through the horde of orcs, slicing them down one by one, even as they argue over their plan with Dak shouting at Colin for forgetting the hostages while rushing to save him. Colin answers that even if he had given them what they wanted, they would still have killed the hostages. Since that's how it is, Dak tells him he should have given him a sign beforehand to get ready. Colin scolds him for shouting his plan to fight. The two keep fighting while the hostages just stare in total confusion. As they argue, Dak flashes a strange hand gesture that turns out to be the mark of the 3-legged crow, and Dax admits he picked it up from a guy named Rowan way back when they were both slaves. Dax explains that the sign means to catch friendly soldiers, and anyone you find will surely give a hand. In this life, Colin says the signal came from his stubborn best friend, who has now passed away. Dak is surprised to hear this because he doesn't remember any friends from his time as a slave. A short while later, they stepped into the waiting room to find Darius already there. Darius asks Colin how he's feeling, and Colin tells him he's back to health because of his help. Darius then calls the two over to explain that there's a reason he summoned them, and it has to do with what happened in the hunting grounds. Dak turns pale and panics the moment he hears it, fearing Darius is about to yell at them for trespassing. Then Darius steps forward and tells them he has known Glenn and his team for a long time. There's even a picture of him and the whole crew hanging on the wall. Darius says that surviving countless life or death moments together has made them who they are, and since they saved his friends, he can't imagine losing them and has no choice but to thank them. Dak says they shouldn't have let things get so bad if they'd spotted the trouble sooner, but Darius tells them they did nothing wrong because it was his job to see the monster coming. Darius then turns to them and asks if they've heard the offer from Glenn's elite knights, and he wants to hear their answers one more time. Colin was the first to speak, and he politely turned down the offer. Darius leans in to ask Dak where he stands. Dak stammers in panic that someone better should take the offer, but Colin interrupts to tell him the master just wants the truth, so Dak screams that he wants to become one of the elite knights. Darius then looks at Colin and asks him to share whatever wishes he might have. Colin leaves the Lord and Dak speechless when he asks that Erica move back to the Hall estate instead of staying at the Williams place. Darius had to ask again, and Colin told him that Erica and Dak had always been together since they first joined the Hall family. Colin thinks Dak is keeping Erica around because her body is so weak. Darius nods to show he agrees, while Colin explains to the Lord that he and Dak have fought side by side as true comrades, so he cannot let Dak down when he is in danger. Dak can't speak a word as Colin strongly demands that Erica be given back to him. Darius feels touched when Colin speaks of Dak as his close friend. Darius agrees to his request, but warns that it will take some time since the Williams family is involved. Darius tells Dak he can go now, but as Dak walks away, he can't stop wondering why Colin would go to such lengths for him. Once they are alone, Darius tells Colin that the moment he saw him absorb a magic blast in the arena, he knew instantly that Colin was no ordinary slave. He hadn't been surprised at first, but his shock grew when he watched him battle freely. Darius warns that the power Colin wielded looks nothing like an ordinary force. As soon as Colin sees where Darius is headed, he jumps in right away. Colin tells Darius he isn't some superhero, showing off just a tiny bit of his magic to prove he's ordinary. Colin tells Darius that to his own mind, he's just a tiny, unimportant thing. Darius can't believe what he's hearing, so he asks Colin who he really is, and Colin answers with a surprising twist. He begins to sing Darius's praises, saying he feels truly honored to be noticed by someone so great. Colin draws his sword, declaring his mission to fulfill Darius's dream and wipe bloodline supremacy from the world. He drops to his knees before Darius and promises that one day he will be as great as him, and maybe even better. Colin told Darius that since he'd saved his life twice, he was going to show exactly how strong and valuable he was during the selection test. He tells Darius that he can do whatever he wants with him from now on. Darius turns a deep shade of red from all that Colin said, but he forces the color back into his cheeks and tells Colin he might just leave. As Darius walks away, he asks Colin what he thinks of Rowan, but Colin is completely lost by the question. Darius, knowing how clueless he is about Rowan, simply tells him to stop worrying and just go away. After Cornell slips out, he steps into the open and Darius asks his opinion on Colin based on what he saw. Cornell tells Darius that if Colin is truly just an ordinary person, then he must be an incredible genius. Cornell points out that Colin's shocked reaction shows he doesn't know Rowan, meaning Colin isn't from the city of E. But keep your eyes open, because he might be hiding something and want more than he lets on. Cornell tells Darius that a message from the Spirit Cat had just arrived, and Darius can't wait to find out what it says. As Colin walked back into his room, he found out that Darius had helped him keep the best part of the hunt, which meant he could trade it for a lot of supplies. Colin thinks that with all these supplies, his power could grow a lot. But he's worried because the name Rowan sounded familiar, since Dak had told him about it in his past life. Except for his name, he knows nothing else, so Colin decides to ask Dak for more details later. Colin realizes right now that his main goal is to get stronger for the upcoming test. He melts a monster's heart inside a tube, chugs it down, and then wakes up the grimoire. Once the grimoire wakes up, Colin drinks up more potions until he thinks he's had enough. Then he triggers the absorption. Mana rips through Mana's body like his veins are about to explode. A moment later, Grimoire tells him the absorption worked and his magic is now 1 point stronger. Colin discovers from the Grimoire that mixing wolf cores with jade emperor grass should boost his magic, yet even the finest medicine barely helps, sometimes dropping his power by 3 points or failing to gain even a single point. Colin realizes that if his magic fades again, he'll lose control just like last time. So until he can learn to resist magic better, he has no choice but to push his own power even higher. Colin mixes up another potion that tastes so bad he nearly passes out, realizing that chugging down so much of it might make his stomach explode before he even gets his wish. Now he can't help but think there might be another way to get out. Suddenly, the system tells him that a mighty monster core has been found, letting him craft a magic tool using the Wolf King's core as its heart. Colin is shocked to find out that a monster's heart can actually become a magical tool. Without a second's thought, he follows the Grimoire's orders and pours his magic straight into the monster's heart. He closed his eyes and imagined the shape of the magic tool in his mind. Once Colin decides what it should be, he creates the magic tool, and it bursts into a bright golden light. A moment later, the system lets him know that his magic tool is finally ready. Colin glanced around and spotted a bracelet resting on his left arm. The system calls the bracelet the Azure Bracelet, a name it takes from the wolves. This magic tool boosts your power by 1 point and grants you a special gift called Wild Intuition. Colin isn't sure how powerful the bracelet really is, so he chugs a potion just to see what happens. The bracelet instantly boosts his magic, letting him gain 2 points instead of 1 without any strain, and Colin is happy to find that magic tools are so handy. but he has no idea what magic this special effect can pull off. As soon as he turned it on, he was shocked to see two maids standing right outside the wall, appearing clear as day and even audible to his X-ray vision. Colin is so shocked he screams out. Soon, he discovers it isn't X-ray vision at all, but special power that lets him see the energy inside people. He looks around until he spots Darius and Katrina in their room. A spot on their body was leaking mana, which told Colin right away that he was looking at magic. Then he hears a strange voice asking if they are hungry. This gets Colin worried, and he looks around frantically wondering where the strange voice is coming.